The Nerdcast Empire is on the air. It is the Friday edition of the Nerdcast News Report for Friday, March the 14th, 2025. I am Matt in the studio. Great to have you along with us. We are going to wrap up the week with all the big nerdy news you need to know as you head into your weekend. And got a little bit of Pokemon Go news, which is probably has dominated most of the news cycle over the last 48 hours. And we'll talk a little bit about an interesting story about Amazon Prime Video and the use of AI dubbing. How many Switch units are already ready to go, ready to sell here in the U.S.? At least a rumor has that as being the case. And then some upcoming events for Chrono Trigger and NIS, which the NIS one is going on this morning, and we'll update you on what we know from that already here in the early going. But joining me, as always, on this Friday morning is Mike. Mike, how's it going?
It's going. Glad the week has now reached its end. Kind of some fun news stories, both positive and negative, but certainly interesting to go over today. And just excited to get into it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because some of these news stories are clearly positive, and some are clearly maybe not positive, and then there are some others that maybe the jury's out on how positive or negative these stories are going to be. And so, we're going to kind of get into it and speculate a little bit on how we think they kind of all break down. And we're going to start with, like I said, probably the one that has most dominated the news cycle over the past 48 hours. And it's not surprising. It's something that has been rumored for a while that Niantic was going to be looking at getting rid of pretty much most, if not all, of their gaming portfolio, and they have done that. They're going to, or have sold it to Saudi Arabian mobile publisher Scopely for $3.85 billion. That is obviously a ton of money, and $3.5 billion of it. I'm trying to see how this is explained. Buying the games and the teams, and then there's an additional $350 million in cash just kind of thrown in. The full deal is supposed to close at the end of 2025. But I don't think any of this is a surprise as far as the act of them selling Pokemon Go. I think there's been rumors for a while that they may be looking to do that. But they have sold it to a company that doesn't have necessarily the best reputation with gamers because of games that they have currently. Monopoly Go is probably the biggest example of a game that was mentioned quite a bit online that is pretty aggressively loot heavy, I think, is the biggest complaint. And Pokemon Go is a game that is obviously set up to be that type of game if you really want to run it that way. Obviously, you've played Pokemon Go. Your kind of just general thoughts on what this kind of looks like at the onset.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like Pokemon Go is a game that your results will vary based so much on where you're at. If you're a more rural player, it is very much super monetized because if you want to get anywhere or do anything with any regularity, you're going to have to throw money into it. Now, obviously, if you're more in the city, that's not as much of a big deal because you can spin Pokestops pretty regularly and accumulate a lot of items and Pokeballs. But anytime a game like this changes hands in the modern era, you just have to assume it's because some other company wants to use it to make even more money. And I've heard of Monopoly Go mostly through their kind of dumb commercials you see fairly regularly.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with the other games Scopely's running. Marvel Strike Force, Star Trek Fleet Command, Looney Tunes World of Mayhem. Figured out some sort of insurance commercial, but no, it's a Looney Tunes game. But Pokemon Go's had a good run. Been around since 2016, and if they do decide to monetize it even further, then I think you're going to have a lot of people. There's so many ways to enjoy the hobby of Pokemon beyond Pokemon Go. I think the whole thing's been weird to me just over the years. Like, I've enjoyed it as kind of a walking companion, but that's really about the extent of my involvement. When they started bringing in quests where they wanted you to like walk around and take more pictures of individual landmarks, I thought that was always kind of weird. And it does seem like Niantic is definitely shifting their focus more into kind of the AR space and how they can use that to basically further AI and potentially even robotics in the future. So it's kind of a wild thing, and we'll see how long Pokemon Go remains fairly similar to what it is now.
And it should be noted, obviously, the other games in this acquisition are not maybe as heavily played, but it is worth noting that Pikmin Bloom and Monster Hunter Now are also included in this acquisition, obviously as lesser pieces, just for the monetary thing. And, the one thing when you look at it is you have to think that there's a limit to what they can actually do, because part of acquiring something for $3.5 billion is that you're counting on the player base, the player activity to at the very least hold steady, if not increase. That would be the goal. So, yeah, I'm sure they're going to find new ways to monetize the game, but I also think they have to be very careful because, Pokemon Go was such a unique way to get people out of their house and out and exploring the world and doing that. And there are a lot of people that play that game that probably wouldn't need a whole lot of motivation to get back in their house and not go out and explore.
Absolutely.
So, you are playing with fire if you mess with it too much, because those people will just come back to the console and not play it anymore. And, of course, we've talked about with the Switch 2 coming out, there are going to be new Pokemon properties coming from Nintendo on their system soon. And, I think if you're Scopely, you've got probably a short window of 3 to 6 months to kind of reassure the players, like, hey, this is still going to be good. We're going to make it better. It's not just going to be a money grab. We know it's going to be a little bit of a money grab because you don't pay $3.5 billion, like you said, not to try to make more money off the game. Yeah. But, you want to try to reassure the people who do play it more on a casual basis for fun, a walking companion, that experience isn't going to go away, and we're going to do what we can to make that experience better, while for people who are hardcore into it and want to give us their money, we'll give them new ways to do that. So it's going to be interesting to see how you can balance that out to make sure you're not just throwing $3.5 million or $1 billion into a burner and just setting it on fire.
And that's just this purchase. That's not even accounting for the fact that last year, 2 years ago, Savvy Games Group bought Scopely. So, Savvy Games Group is the company that's a subsidiary of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's Saudi Arabia Public Investment Fund.
Yeah.
So they've already dumped a bunch of money in the gaming space. And it's kind of a part of a bigger story where it's clear that he and Saudi Arabia are really looking to get deep in pop culture. You look at all the different things they're involved in and will be involved in. It's certainly an interesting time.
It is, and we don't really get too deep into the political world on this podcast, but there are certainly geopolitical and economic, factors that are, involved in this, that they are obviously trying to, get their hands in a little bit of everything, and we've seen it, in the sports world with obviously golf is the biggest one with the, the spinoff golf organization and has now kind of opened the door for them potentially to have a merger with the PGA and get into that space. We just saw an announcement that they're starting a boxing. Organization, a spinoff of the UFC. Obviously, they spend a lot of money on tennis and soccer. Big soccer personalities signing in the country. So I think that is also another concern. It's when you have somebody that has so much money that they don't care about blowing a little bit of it, that maybe the quality of the game is not going to be at the forefront, because it's like, well, if we lose $3.5 billion, we'll just dig a new oil well and we'll just make that money back tomorrow.
And that was my thought, was that mobile gaming is essentially modern day oil industry as far as printing money. You could draw comparisons between the two industries, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm not surprised to see them kind of getting knee deep in the mobile gaming space.
Yeah, so it's certainly a story we're going to keep an eye on, because, like I said, I think they've got about a 3 to 6 month window once all this is finalized to try to win over the gamers of Pokemon Go and make sure they try to keep as many of those people engaged at some level. Otherwise, people are just going to move on to the next thing. So, fascinating story. I think there are certainly larger ramifications than we even realize at this point, but we'll certainly keep an eye on where this story goes as this kind of the fallout from the sale kind of really takes effect in the days and weeks to come. A couple other smaller stories today. This is kind of a day of smaller stories, although this one could be a bigger story down the road. And I saw this last week and didn't really get the chance to bring it up because obviously we were off for a few days. But the news coming out that Amazon Prime Video, who of course one of the biggest streamers in the world, we've been talking about them on this podcast because of course they're going to be streaming the new Gundam series. They've announced an AI dubbing pilot program for licensed TV series and movies. And at least when you read this article, or at least kind of the vibe I get off of it is at first, a lot of this is going to be focused. And we saw a similar story on the manga side a few months ago in putting quick dubs on things that wouldn't get a dub otherwise, countries that maybe would be underrepresented by their language, a chance to dub it to some degree as another means of which to get into a market. But you don't start something like this without the intent of eventually using this for your mainstream English and Spanish and some of your big languages content. And I think it's probably too early to immediately say this is the worst thing ever, but it is a little concerning, I think, if you're an anime fan, because anime is a niche product. I mean, that's just the reality of it. And so if you want to test something like this on a product that's going to have a smaller viewer base, therefore you can kind of get an idea of what they think of it first before you maybe do major motion pictures or something like that. I could certainly see that potentially happening, but it's going to be interesting because, again, that whole when is it okay to use AI? When is it not okay to use AI? Who's quality checking this thing? There's a lot of more questions at this point than answers with this project.
Yeah, and I think it's the quality aspect that I'm most hung up on. And I think I would feel a little better about this if it was a Japanese company that was spearheading this effort and not Amazon Prime. I feel like if it was the actual Japanese production companies doing this, you could make the case of, oh, that's cool because maybe someday that means we'll cut out some of the middlemen from anime creation to something that I can consume over here. I think when you have Amazon Prime doing it, or really, I mean, you could make the same case for Crunchyroll or any company over here. They mentioned in the article that they're going to work closely with localization professionals as far as to make sure the AI is being trained properly, and it's like you hope the right people are getting in those positions because that's what's going to make or break it is how the AI is trained. If it's trained to spit out some of the less high quality stuff that we've seen lately, we're not gaining anything.
Yeah.
Like it has to be quality. It has to be consistent. If we can get to that point, fine. But I'm still skeptical as to what the end product looks like here.
And I think the biggest issue so far, and we've seen it with automated subtitles and how inconsistent they've been, or not quality checked at all, where you have sections missing or completely wrong or from the wrong show in some cases.
Yeah.
I think the question is always going to be with these type of projects, how many broken eggs are you going to have to suffer through before you get an omelet? And, I think, I mentioned that the anime crowd is in some regard ripe for testing this because if you can make those people happy, odds are the general public's not going to have any idea when you unleash this on something more wide, ranging. But the other side of it is true too. Like those people are very loyal and very particular about how they're spending their money in the anime industry. And unfortunately, there are also a lot of them that are not spending their money in the anime industry. That's a totally different topic. But, there are a group of us, and I would include us in this group, that almost take pride at this point in supporting the industry. We're going to buy the streaming services. We're going to buy the physical releases when you give them to us. We're going to go to conventions and support these people that are trying to make this stuff that we really enjoy. When you start looking for ways to cut corners and you take some of the talented people that are trying to bring this stuff to you out of the equation, and you're basically saying, well, we can just give you AI dubbing because we don't care, you're running the risk of turning all those people off. And I think that's a real danger here, is that, the quality's not going to be good. People are going to be fed up with it very quickly. And of course, what happens when people get fed up? They immediately turn to piracy. Like, it's like, if you're going to give me a crappy end product that I am paying for, well, I'm just going to not pay for that product anymore. And I feel like we should have been getting away from that easy push to piracy, but for some reason, these companies keep making these decisions that are just making it much easier for people to circle back around to illegal means by which to watch this stuff.
Yeah, I only hope, and this is probably best case scenario, is that any money they might be saving with this push for AI is then put into the user experience on their streaming platforms.
Yeah.
Because if those work properly, I think I'm okay with all of this. It's just a matter of, as the customer, I want the best experience, whether it's done by a machine or a human. Just don't, because that's a thing that a lot of people talk about, is even just the website viewing experience on a lot of these piracy sites is vastly superior.
Yeah.
That's something that can be fixed. Like, you can avoid that. Like,
well, we just saw a post on the Crunchyroll subreddit yesterday talking about how their video quality's been going down. And, I know that Crunchyroll is not, there was not their plan to make their videos look worse, but the problem is, a bigger issue is that, these companies' biggest expenses right now is bandwidth.
yeah.
And spending the money to be able to stream all of this content. And, not to say illegal companies don't have that too, but maybe they have some more luxury into how they encode their episodes or whatever it may be that allows them to maybe save on that. But, they're trying to keep some of these streaming costs reasonable, both for the end user and for the company. But at the same time, they're not spending the money on the UX on the front end, so it makes the user experience bad. And now you're going to make the episodes look worse. It's like, why am I still using this product?
My concern about that is I worry that they have some sort of data somewhere that suggests that the vast majority of the people watching Crunchyroll anime are doing it on their phones.
Yeah.
So there's really no reason to give you higher quality than what your phone can possibly give you.
Which is crazy if that's true, because why?
I hope that's not the case, but that's my first thought.
That's entirely possible. But again, if you have UX people who can give you a different quality output on a mobile device compared to your Roku, to your Fire Stick, like, you can do that. Like,
that should be totally reasonable.
But it's really interesting. And like I said, I'm not sure how I feel about it.
The other takeaway from this article is, I guess I didn't realize just how popular Amazon Prime was in terms of the anime space. I mean, the Parrot Analytics 2023 data suggesting that it's the fourth most popular anime streaming service, and overwhelmingly popular amongst like Gen Z and millennials.
I mean, so many of those people, and obviously we're, just in the kind of age group above those groups, they have Amazon Prime, so you've already got it. Like, it's one of those things that you do so much of your shopping on there, like, you've already got the service. There were some issues, I think, when they first got into it with their UX, but again, we've seen Amazon successfully stream NFL football every Thursday night. Like, and if you can do that with the kind of volume that watch that, you can certainly handle episodes of anime. And I think the reason maybe it kind of flew under the radar here is that I feel like maybe they don't have as many U.S. licenses, that a lot of the licenses they have are in other countries in the world. But now I think that with, G-Quox, this is one of the first titles that they're getting the worldwide streaming rights to. And so I think it's going to come more to the forefront here in the U.S., which of course makes stories like this come more to the forefront as well. But
I think it also highlights an issue that your Crunchyrolls and your High Dives and Funimation and all them they're gonna struggle with, is that Amazon Prime, Netflix, Hulu, they're all-encompassing platforms.
Yeah.
Millennials and Gen Z may not want to drop $150 a month over 12 streaming platforms. So if we can cut down the volume that we have and still get the widest range of entertainment, I think that's why in the article amongst that with that survey, they mentioned that, Amazon Prime ranked behind Hulu, but ahead of Crunchyroll, Max, Tubi, VRV, High Dive. People are going to want the best bang for their buck.
Yeah, for sure. And as these streaming services get more expensive, you absolutely have to just kind of decide which ones are essential. Now,
and which one's actively making a better product for me.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like Crunchyroll is maybe not doing that at the moment. I feel like High Dive does make a good effort. Like their app's not great, but at least you feel like you're supporting, people who are trying with High Dive. So it's going to be interesting to see if this is kind of Amazon Prime's opportunity to maybe take a little bigger piece of the U.S. market with all of this. And,
the Crunchyroll situation kind of reminds me of years ago at Blockbuster, when Blockbuster was still both relevant and a really big deal. It was super successful. There was this push at one point that in order just to cut hours, we need to make sure people are out of the store, the employees are out of the store no more than 15 minutes after close. And they were okay with the idea that, well, maybe the store wouldn't be as clean or as organized as a result. And I remember like one of the phrases that was thrown around was people would walk over dead bodies to rent our movies. And that was probably about 10 years before the company is now gone, essentially.
Yeah.
So,
turns out they would do that for a while.
Yeah, they'll do it until they don't do it anymore.
Yeah, or until you give them another way where they don't have to do it anymore. And that's kind of what happened with Blockbuster. And I think that's something that we'll have to keep an eye on here, too. That
landscape's always shifting.
It is. It's just there's too much money in it for it not to. So, interesting stuff. I'll be curious when we get a little better idea of what this AI dubbing is going to look like and kind of maybe get some reviews on that. A few other stories just wanted to get to, and I don't know how much rumor stories are really stories, but this was just kind of fascinating and something that's worth a quick mention. The rumor has it that 400,000 Nintendo Switch 2 units have already been imported into the United States. That happened within days of the console's announcement, according to a report. And so it kind of sounds like they are gearing up for this big release, and maybe this release will happen sooner rather than later if all the stock is already here. We know the Direct is coming up in a couple of weeks. We'll certainly have full coverage of that when it comes up. But it makes me wonder, because I think the prevailing mindset was that we were looking for a summertime launch. It makes me wonder, maybe they'll think about getting it done sooner if they've got that many units already kind of geared up and ready to go here in the States.
Yeah, I think a lot of people looked at those live events they have scheduled, and they think, clearly the release, it may be sooner than we expect, but it's going to be after those.
Yeah.
And I think that's why a lot of people are eyeing June, because I think those live events go into May. It's hard to say. I can only hope, just based on these numbers, because they mentioned also that was what was imported in January. They assume there's been more since.
Yeah.
You only hope that means that when it comes time to hit street date for the Switch 2, we're not going to see any kind of difficulty getting a hold of the hardware, because I think that's always the concern. I think back to the days of like the Wii release and how tough those were to get a hold of.
Yeah.
And, more recently, like the PS5, people will buy it. Just make it available.
Well, and I think Nintendo probably saw what happened with the PS5 and thought, we can't let this happen. Like, we want people to get this in their hands. We want people to be willing to buy it right out of the gate. So we need to make sure that we've got plenty of units available so people can get it and not have to. Because the biggest issue is not so much that you don't want to have some level of scarcity to drive people like, I have to get it now because I may not get it for 2 or 3 months, but it's the secondary market. It's the people going and buying 10 of them, selling 9 of them online for
3 times the cost.
Right. And so, you're not making the money off of those. Now these people are making the money off of those. So I think in order to try to limit that bootleg market, the resale market, you've got to have enough stock out of the gate to be able to do this. And I think that may also be a sign that some of these announcements we're going to see in April are exciting enough that they are counting on people being like, yeah, I have a Switch. It's really nice, but I have to get the Switch too because I have to play whatever title it is that we're going to see.
That new 3D Mario game is going to be worth it, presumably.
Yeah. So it was just like nothing real newsworthy with that other than I like to kind of keep the Switch 2 announcements as we kind of get rumors and stuff in the news cycle because, again, I think that's going to be our big story as we go into Q2 of 2025 is this direct in April. And
every next story makes you think, man, we're getting close.
Yeah, it's here, basically. So we're already halfway through March. So April is right around the corner. So, we'll kind of keep an eye on any upcoming stories as far as that goes. A couple of just small things, although, like I said, one of them kind of in progress this morning. So we'll get to the one that's maybe just kind of a teaser for what might be to come. Chrono Trigger, obviously regarded as one of, if not the best JRPGs of all time, has announced, or at least announced that there will be announcements regarding 30-year anniversary projects that will be coming up. I think there's still a lot of unknown skepticism as to how big those projects will be. There will be a live stream coming up later today at 10 o'clock Eastern Time, 7 o'clock Pacific, where they're going to do some music from Chrono Trigger. I think we're going to see maybe announcements trickle out over the next few months as to what they may be doing. Will it be an art book? Will it be something along the lines of a HD 2D remaster of the game, which I think a lot of fans are certainly hoping for? It's probably too early to even speculate, but it is always great when you have this classic game that people are going to continue to celebrate, especially in a year where it's celebrating its 30th anniversary.
Yeah, and kind of looking back to the post on X regarding this, the fact that they use the phrase, they're planning a variety of projects over the next year that will go beyond the world of the game. I feel like a lot of what's going to be announced isn't going to be a game. It's just going to be some sort of more celebratory things. And you have this live stream that's going to be playing music from the soundtracks. To me, that kind of points to, and we've seen these become more and more popular and more prevalent, some sort of live orchestral tour playing music from Chrono Trigger. To me, that seems like a no-brainer.
I think especially when they're streaming like 12 hours worth of music, it's almost like,
hey, this is going to be music related. Any other kind of collectible stuff, whether it be art book, figures, anything like that, I could see that as well. I would love some sort of, I don't want to say remake as much because I don't want them to totally reimagine the game. Some sort of more modern-ish version of the game, I suppose, might be a better way to describe what I'm looking for. I think once you go too deep in the idea of making a remake, you're almost telling people the original game wasn't as good as maybe you think it is, so we need to make it better. And I don't think that's the case with Chrono Trigger. I think it's a near perfect game. And if you want to give me new games and more content beyond what we have now with Chrono Cross and the Radical Dreamers, I'm all for that. But otherwise, HD2D would be fine. I mean, looking at the success of games like Live Alive and Dragon Quest III HD2D and the Star Ocean 2 remake, if you just wanted to do that, I'd probably be content. I'm not the harshest critic, but I'm glad that it's in the news and people are talking about it because I feel like that's a franchise that they never really got around to beating to death like some of the others.
Yeah.
And I kind of wish they would just a little more. Give me an anime that covers the story of the game. That would be awesome.
Yeah, for sure. And it'll be curious to see what comes out. Like you said, I feel like it is going to be maybe projects on the smaller side. At the very least, if you kind of anticipate that, then you won't be disappointed with whatever actually comes out.
Yeah.
The other story, which when kind of put it in the rundown, it was a preview, but it's ongoing now. Nipponichi Software, currently, as we speak, or maybe just wrapping up, they're holding their Untitled event to talk about some new titles. Started over in Japan at about, you see the time there, 8 o'clock p.m. So obviously, this is a company that you have had a lot of fun playing their games over the years. Kind of what have you been able to kind of get from the trying to translate the the Japanese stream this morning as you were following along?
Yeah, thankfully, Famitsu's been covering it kind of as it's been unfolding, and between that and Google Translate, I've gotten a decent amount of information. I think first and foremost, you have the new president, Kenzo Sadahashi, talking, and that's really cool. Obviously, their former CEO had passed away a little while ago. It seems like he's really kind of doubling down and committing on new IP creation, which is exciting. Not that I wouldn't want 8 more Disgaea games in the next 8 years.
For sure.
I'd be totally fine with that, but I'm all for they have a certain style about their games that I tend to gravitate towards, and I'm always interested in new IPs from them. Some of the games they have announced so far is the 5th installment of the Fudaiki series, which seems to be kind of a traveling reporter game. This one, you're going around on a motorcycle through the Mie Prefecture, getting to see real-life locations and cuisine, and basically just writing stories that are going to be entered into a competition. It looks interesting. It's probably not a style of game that we would ever see over here with any success, but still kind of a cool thing. And they're also releasing the original one on Steam, and there's DLC for the 4th one on Switch.
Nice.
So apparently it's a relatively successful franchise in Japan. Other game announcements include a Dark Dungeon RPG called Curse, Dark Buddy action game Gobble. And I think these might not be finalized titles. These may just be kind of the project name so far. A new action RPG, Kyodon from the Disgaea staff. Again, more games from the people making Disgaea. I'll take it. A horror game at Enju, and a picture book series, Princess Shinigami. So they got a lot of stuff in the works. We'll see how much of it actually gets Western releases, but always enjoy their stuff.
Yeah, happy to see them not only just continuing to thrive and do great stuff. Their games are always fun, but also not being afraid to jump out there at a time where the gaming industry is like, we're going to take these, established franchises and run them into the ground because we know they're going to make money. I mean, we've seen it on the anime side as well. These guys are like, yeah, we'll still give you more Disgaea games, but we're going to actually promote some new games as well. So that's exciting that they're actually willing to, try to branch out and take some risks, which, is probably why their company's so successful. But really cool stuff from them. And if there's anything newsworthy that breaks out of that we didn't get a chance to mention today, we'll have it on Monday on the Monday edition of the Nerdcast News Report. But it's time to wrap up this edition with the Empire Express. Are you ready to roll?
Let's go.
A rumor posted by Metal Injection on Thursday says that Van Halen drummer Alex Van Halen is working with Toto founder Steve Lukather on some new Van Halen. It would use additional material recorded by Eddie Van Halen, who passed away in 2020. Should fans be excited?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's easy to be cynical when these kind of stories pop up about artists who have passed away but have material laying around. I think at the end of the day, release it if it stands on its own and it gives the fans a new way to kind of celebrate that artist. Great. If not, then we just know it was a cash grab. I don't think that's the case here. I know there's a similar story kind of involving Pantera with works like that. More music the merrier, and we'll decide whether or not it seems justified or not.
Absolutely.
Yesterday, after 12 years, the NCAA Football 14 servers were shut down by EA. Of course, there's a new college football game in 2025 with another planned out this summer. Are you surprised the servers were still running?
Honestly, I thought they would just, if they were, first off, I was shocked that they were still running even all these years later. And I'm also surprised that they didn't just shut them down the day they released 2025. But I'm sure it was a day of mourning for a lot of people who probably never gave up playing NCAA Football 14, thinking that was going to be the last game in the franchise. Billy Corgan is turning Smashing Pumpkins' classic album Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness into an opera. It will feature Corgan alongside the Lyric Opera of Chicago Orchestra and Chorus. And my question for you is, why?
Billy Corgan is a dude that will just do whatever he wants to do, and I respect him endlessly for it.
Yeah.
Whether it's purchasing and running a wrestling promotion or turning one of his biggest albums into an opera. To me, Melancholy and Infinite Sadness, first off, it's a huge album, but I always kind of felt like he saw it in an even greater scope than what a 2 CD album could give you, and I think that's why we're going to see this. I'm kind of curious about it. On the heels of the MLB Demon Slayer collab surrounding the Tokyo Series games, Epic Games has announced the Dodgers standout Shohei Ohtani will receive his own set of cosmetics in Fortnite. Do you think all these crossovers will help baseball bring in a younger demographic?
Maybe. Like, I feel like they, with all the rule changes to make the game shorter, they're certainly trying to appeal to really everybody with that, except for like the really hardcore old people that like 5-hour baseball games. But yeah, I mean, we've seen all these anime crossovers in Fortnite, obviously popular with the young crowd. So, why not? Maybe you get a chance because your customers are dying. MLB customers are dying. The average age of people watching baseball a couple years ago was like in
112.
Yeah, pretty close. So I think it was like 65. So you've got to bring in new fans. Finally, rumors swirling around the world of professional wrestling. The current, but I guess will eventually be former New Japan standout Jeff Cobb, who just beat Tetsuya Naito in the New Japan Cup this morning, maybe on his way to WWE. Does this make sense for both sides?
Absolutely. The guy's put in the work. He has a unique presence and presentation and charisma. He could be a monster in NXT against smaller competitors, or even be an interesting mismatch for Obafemi, considering he's obviously considerably shorter, but just as big. They could even lean into kind of his Filipino background and upbringing in Guam and Hawaii and add him to some sort of further extended bloodline storyline. Or they could put him in a mask like Lucha Underground and make him Matanza again. There's so much this guy can do, and I think where WWE is right now, he stands a really good chance of getting over big.
Yeah, I think so too. And WWE just slowly rebuilding Lucha Underground one guy at a time, which is
let's go.
Pretty wild stuff.
Bring in Vampiro.
You know what? I mean, why not at this point? I'd be totally for that. But that is going to wrap up this edition of the Nerdcast News Report for Friday, March the 14th. You're all caught up as you head into your weekend with all your nerdy news. We'll be back on Sunday night, 7 o'clock Eastern Time, with another episode of the Hard Rock Empire. The music of February the 28th will be on tap. And then, of course, we'll be back with you 8:30 a.m. Monday morning to get your week started with another episode of the Nerdcast News Report. A big thanks to the entire crew. Big thanks to Mike for joining me. Big thanks to you for listening whenever and wherever you may be listening. That's going to wrap things up. We'll join you again on Sunday for the Hard Rock Empire. Until then, don't forget to join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.